Hello, I'm Johnny at the Authors Guild Foundation, and we're here for part two of media training for authors with Paula Rizzo. In part one, Paula gave her advice for creating video content and prepping for on-camera interviews. That was a great one. You can find the video of that. But today we're going to discuss the IRL version, public speaking, book tours, other in-person events where authors might be reading, discussing, and hopefully selling their work. So this webinar is part of our series Business Boot Camps for Writers, which is funded in part by the National Endowment for the Arts and by Penguin Random House, thanks to them. The foundation puts on free public programming like this as the charitable arm of the Authors Guild. If you're not a guild member, we welcome you to check us out at authorsguild.org to learn more about our legal advice, website building, online community, and other benefits and services that we provide. I'd also like to thank our partner organizations who helped us assemble this webinar, Broadleaf Writers Association in the Atlanta area and the Carnegie Center for Literacy and Learning in Lexington, Kentucky. So thank you all for being here today and for submitting questions beforehand. Those helped shape the talk that we're going to have today. Additional questions can be placed in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And automatic captions are available for your convenience. Just look for the transcript or captions button at the bottom of your screen. And now let's welcome authors Clay McLeod Chapman, Julia Royston, and Amelia Zachry, and our moderator, Paula Rizzo. Paula is an Emmy Award-winning television producer and the best-selling author of Listful Thinking and Listful Living. She's a media training coach and host of the live stream show Inside Scoop and creator of the popular online training Media Ready Author. Paula and our panel, thanks, and I'll turn it over to you, Paula.
Thank you so much for having us. We're super excited. Thank you for those of you who are joining me again. I hope you enjoyed part one. I certainly did. This one is going to be a little bit different because we have real authors here to talk all about their experiences in the media, in bookstores, live events, on stage, virtual events, all of the above. So we're going to cover a little bit of everything from how do you book events and media? How do you prepare for these events when you're actually there? And, sometimes things go wrong. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And then lastly, how do you keep the momentum going? After maybe the book is out for a while, how do you keep getting asked back for these things? And more importantly, keep in touch with the people who hopefully will buy your books. So I'm going to throw out one question for the group. Each person will introduce themselves and answer this question. I'm going to start with Amelia. And the question is, Amelia, what has been your most successful public speaking experience in terms of selling books?
Hi, I am Amelia Zachry, and I'm the author of Enough, a memoir of mistakes, mania, and motherhood. That's my debut memoir, and it was launched in October of 2022, and in the year preceding that, and in the months after, I have been deep in building my author platform through like 50 over podcast interviews that I've done, radio interviews and TV interviews, written interviews, and book events. So when we're talking about book events, I think I wanted to say that public speaking engagements, I think, usually are more publicity exercises than they are direct sales tools. But I think a book event is unique in the sense that you get to speak publicly about your book, and sales usually follows after that. And so for the purpose of this conversation, I think my most successful event that I've been on is a book festival panel that I was on. And that allowed engagement with the members in the audience and to make a connection with me and ask questions and get to know me and about my book. And then I had a huge success with my sales of books after that. So that was my most successful book event.
Fantastic. An in-person event, yes?
Yes.
Yes. And there are no guarantees in this, right? You might think, oh, I'm going to be on the Today Show. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to sell tons of books. Not always the case. So Julia, what has been your experience?
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Julia Royston. I own BK Royston Publishing and Royal Media and Publishing and the book consulting services company, the Book Business Bosses. And I have written 80 books. I've published many more and consulted with authors on many more. So my most successful speaking and book sales have been a combination of all of that. Actually speaking, then being a part of a panel, and then I sing too as well. So I have been on faith-based events where I have sang, I have been a speaker, and I've also been a part of a panel. And then that's always a major selling point, and people always support you and sometimes buy out. They buy my music and they buy my books, and because they have more opportunity to meet you. And I know we'll be talking more about things to help you in that public speaking realm, but that's the most successful when I combine as many opportunities as I have for people to get to know me, hear me, and see me.
So that's two for two in-person events. All right, Clay, what do you got?
Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in today. My name's Clay McLeod Chapman, and I get to write books, comic books, children's books for film and television, podcasts, and most recently, my most current novel is called Ghost Eaters, which is a spooky ghost book. And then this year in September, my new book novel is called What Kind of Mother? And to answer your question, I mean, honestly, it's kind of a melding of the two, where whether it's in person or virtual, the kind of panel symposium group event, the kind of shared concert is always kind of the best for kind of crossover, I guess you could say. Maybe it's a bit of conversion theory, where I would be so lucky to believe that there are 5 people who came today for this event, but I'm thinking about the 100 people who came for you, Paula, the 200 who came for Julia, and those are the people who have never heard of me before, and they'll be like, oh wow, that fella said something that was interesting enough, like I'm gonna check him out now. And it's always the people that you can't account for who come for someone else, who then suddenly glom onto something you say or read or did, and that's the kind of the gravy effect. Those are probably the events that tend to do the best for me.
Proximity is everything, for sure. Yes, that's, for me, I think, I've done a lot of media, TV media, podcasts, things like that. Podcasts, I feel like are for me, have been very, very successful, but also webinars. I know all of you love your in-person events, and I do too, but I was doing a good live webinar years and years before COVID, before it became cool and the thing to do. So I find that to be, for me, the most the best way to sort of get people to be interested in you and your book. So let's talk a little bit more about book events. And this is for anyone who wants to jump in first. How have you gotten those opportunities? So several of you have talked about, the panel or, the book festival or those types of things. How have you been able to actually book those events, in person or virtual?
I'll dive in, just because I feel like my immediate answer is, we're in this kind of, there was a pre-COVID, there was a COVID, and now we're in this kind of post-COVID I say post-COVID, we're in that kind of lingering what we are now kind of effect. And I believe that, a lot of bookstores are doing in-store events again. They want to kind of open the floodgates once more. And there's kind of an excitement to bring authors and, book buyers back into the store. So I feel like, for me, the kind of collaborative effort between your publisher, whoever your kind of in-house publicist is, and yourself, kind of like doing a bit of a team up and saying like, let's hit the ground running. I find, honestly, there are booksellers and librarians who are just so eager to engage. I find Twitter and social media has been this amazing kind of bridge of kind of establishing a conversation with booksellers who are, they're hungry for events. And when I geared up for my last book tour, there was just this desire to like, I will say yes to any event that is within, within my physical capacity to kind of hop in the car and drive. I will go. I will read to that one person who shows up, and I will happily sign their book, because then the booksellers end up being, kind of your kind of brothers and sisters in arms, where they're the ones who are kind of like, oh my gosh, this person came in and they read, and we love them so much, and their book is great, and you should read it, even if you weren't at that event that happened 3 months ago. So it's almost like you want to keep that momentum going, that enthusiasm going, and the people who do it are the booksellers.
Yeah, and the booksellers are good friends to have, I have to say. My first book and my second book I did with Book Culture, which is in New York City. And it was lovely because, I already had a built-in family, to your point. They already knew me. It was already nice to say, hey, I have another book. Could we do something else together? What about you, Julia or Amelia?
So I'll jump right in. Clay is right on target. As an author and a publisher, I not only create events or partner with others for myself, but for other authors. So I've created, along with the author who's in Montgomery, Alabama, we're having a Montgomery Book Fest and Writing Expo. So we're combining, for those who have already written books, an outlet for their books, as well as a place where those of you who may still want to write or haven't written your books can have an outlet, and having a writing workshop and actually speak to other authors and a publisher all at the same time. So between reaching out to outlets that are already there, which the bookstores have been phenomenal, libraries are wonderful. Anytime it's a win-win and it makes sense on either end, whether I go alone with my books or I bring a conglomerate of people with me, or I partner with someone else. Social media is also good at that. There have been people out there that have been looking for speakers, and especially they want speakers that do have books to go along with it. So the world is, as Clay said, we're still kind of navigating the post-COVID, when will COVID ever go away space. And in the meantime, we're having an opportunity that people that are receptive and their doors have been closed are wide open right now. It just needs to make sure that it's a win-win situation with the author and the person that's hosting, timing, scheduling, promotion, but it can be a win-win opportunity for all of us. And I'm grateful.
I think I would add that I'm on board. I was like, oh, what am I going to say after all of this? Yes to all of it. But I think one thing that we could touch on is networking. I think as an author, no one tells you that networking is so important in building your connections for all of this, whether it's booksellers or whether it's other authors or whether it's event venues or other, as a memoirist, I sell my books on the topic. Right. So I sell my book on the topic of mental health and sexual assault awareness. And so getting in touch with those people in the community and being able to attend speaking engagements like that and sell my books too. So I think being in networking, just in people around the community, the writing community and the community at large, I think is very beneficial for us as authors.
Yeah. And you never know how long those relationships will last. I met somebody from the Authors Guild probably 4 or 5 years ago at Book Expo America. Remember Book Expo America, which I loved, was my favorite event, made rest in peace. And now here I am hosting this event. How many years later, and that came from a real life incident, in person. Same thing with my first book. I've met my publisher at Book Expo America. She followed my blog for many, many years and ended up pitching her the book, and she bought it. So you just never know where those in-person events will take you. So book events for sure. What about media? Because media is a little bit of a different animal, right? This is the world that I come from as a TV producer for many, many years. Media is not necessarily interested in, being your advertiser, right, for your book. So you have to give them something that they want for their audience. You have to be of service. If you've watched part 1 of this, I talk about that quite a lot. How have the three of you been able to book media events or, media opportunities for your books?
I've been leaning in to the current events because, like I say, I'm selling a memoir, and I think it would apply to any nonfiction author too, that we lean into the current, relating our topic of discussion to current events. So I leaned into the Me Too movement, into the normalizing mental health movement, and like I was able to pitch stories instead of my book.
Mm-hmm.
Pitch stories like I kind of say like I take an angle as in like we need to work towards normalizing mental health, and my book Enough is a tool to exposing the realities of mental illness. So I'm using that as a story instead of saying like, here's my book, let's sell my book for me.
Amazing. I mean, and this is exactly the way that everyone should be doing it, right? This is something that you have something to talk about that's timely, and your book is something that you can tie to it. Now, the things that are in your book are not always going to be the thing that you talk about. I know a lot of my media training clients worry about that. They say, oh, well, that's not in the book. And I said, who cares? They're going to identify you as the author of that book. I do it all the time. If anybody's in New York City, I'm going to be on Pix 11 today at 4:45 p.m. talking about productivity tips for your personality type. That is not in either of my books. I completely made that up. And so, they're going to identify me as the author of Blissful Thinking and Blissful Living. It's a win, right? Julia, what about you? How have you been able to get your media interviews?
It's relationships. Now, Amelia, exactly right. You've got to make sure that it's something that they need, and not pitching to sell my book, pitching the topic. Is it timely? Is it needful? Do they want to approach that? In the Louisville area where I am, there is an organization that I'm part of, the Louisville Independent Business Association, and the Legal Association actually has media that they offer access to the business owners. So therefore, people in media are actually looking for articles related to small business and people in business. So sometimes they're coming to us with topics that they need. So back to Amelia's point, making sure that we have something to say about that subject matter. If the book comes along, people find us, people forget about technology. If you just put Julia Royston in, or Amelia Zachry in, or Clay Chapman in, you'll get everything else that goes along with it. So the beauty of that is making sure that you have those relationships, you establish those relationships that will meet their need, and then it'll be a win-win for you too as well. So having relationships, authentic ones, not to every time they see you, every time they see your email, they're like, she's trying to sell something. I'm sorry, she's trying to sell something. No, you said you needed something related to that. If it fits my book, great. If it doesn't. So it's all about consistency, being out there. People will watch you. Just like you said, Paula, you met someone at, and I never did get to Book Expo America, and it went out before I even got there. But anyway, long story short, but people do watch you for a long time.
Definitely.
And don't get discouraged because they don't jump right in immediately. They're looking for consistency. They're not only looking for your topic, they're looking for you being consistent about your message. They're looking for you to be the champion of your message, having the passion for your message. And they're going to watch you for a while. Your social media, your website, and everything in between. So it's about relationships. It's about consistency and making sure, as I said before, it's a win-win.
Oh, yeah. I mean, journalists will stalk you for a long time. I know as a journalist, this is what I did with all of the people that I would book. I'd watch them for a while and see, what are they putting on social media? What is happening over here? But you made a great point that journalists need you. They need your stories. That's what they're doing. They have a job to do. So you come in and you help out with this great story idea, which happens to have a whole book that goes along with it. So like, what about, right? I mean, it's just amazing. It's like, oh, you're welcome. And you become their go-to for years and years. It's important to keep those connections. I've always been a big proponent of LinkedIn. Even before I became a LinkedIn learning instructor, as a TV producer, I always connected with people. And that has come to serve me very, very well through the years, because you never know where those journalists will end up. They will move from place to place, but you have their information and you can always stay in touch. So Clay, how about you? I know one of the questions people are going to ask is, how do you get the contact information for people? So how have you been able to book these media events and, get people to say yes?
It's interesting. I mean, I feel like I have three answers. And, 200 years ago, when, print media was kind of at the vanguard, you would book your local event at the independent bookstore. They would have a PR person who would connect you to the local press, and if you were lucky, you would have a paragraph or two in whatever the local publication was. And that seems to be kind of making a shift into podcasts, into digital media, which is the kind of shelf life of, say, something that pops up online is it kind of there's a little bit more to it, and it kind of stretches beyond kind of whatever your kind of specific location, wherever your event is. And I feel like it's kind of speaking to what Amelia said. I think if you can kind of posit yourself as, if not an authority on one particular topic, at least someone who has a take on it. And I've found a lot of luck in writing essays, personal essays, which is not about the book itself, but it's like, grief in literature, or, addiction in fiction, or, take your pick of whatever the topic is. And then maybe somewhere, towards the end, you're like, in my book, ... I explore. And, it's not the sales pitch as much as it is, this is why I get to kind of talk about this in some kind of realm of expertise or experience. And people kind of come to that and say, I don't know, I feel like there's an honesty to it that people appreciate, and if they're so inclined and compelled, they'll find your book. But podcasts, podcasts is this amazing kind of durable machine where you're dealing with the people who kind of follow or listen to this one particular podcast or this particular podcast. And again, social media, it's such a godsend, because once you start befriending or following those places, you can kind of establish a communication, a dialogue, make them aware of the fact that your novel is coming out in 3 months. And if they're looking for guests, it just so happens that, you wrote a book about X, Y, and Z. And I see in the past, you've covered this topic or this topic. And, I find that these podcasts are planning like their season, like they're probably already planning October at this point. And you want to kind of get in on that, and say, I have something that might interest you. And if I can send you an arc, please read it over the summer. And while you're booking September, October, November, keep me in mind.
Yeah, you want to make sure that you are helpful to them, but also to your point about podcasters, a lot of podcasters, that's not their full-time job. That's something else that they're doing on the side. And so anytime you can come in and be like, hey, here's a bunch of questions that you could ask me, and have everything all set and all ready, just make it very, very easy. Think through that beforehand. And we're going to talk about preparing and how to prep. And I do have a freebie of that I will mention right here, because it's a perfect segue. It's paularizzo.com/10Q. And it's the 10 questions that every author needs to be able to answer in the media. And I know this because I was a producer forever, and this is what I do with my clients. And every time I have a new client, I say, okay, here's the 10 questions. Let's go through them. How are you going to answer them? When somebody asks, what's your book about? How are you? And so it's the same thing when you're pitching. You want to be able to give those answers to people. Clay, I just want to stick with you for 1 second, because fiction is a little bit harder to pitch than nonfiction, right? Nonfiction is a little bit easier because, you can pull things that are going on in the world at the time or whatever it is. But what have you found to be helpful for pitching fiction specifically? And then Amelia, I want to go to you for memoir, because that's also a different animal.
Blurbs and reviews, if I'm being honest. I feel like, I've been publishing for 20 years. And I think I'm still waiting for that kind of overnight success moment where suddenly people be like, they're heralding the arrival of this brilliant new voice, which, may never come. But in the meantime, what I've been kind of doing is kind of gradually amassing a dossier of quotes and blurbs and reviews where I can say, you don't have to believe me. Don't take my word for it. Take Publishers Weekly, take Chuck Wendig, take, like maybe someone else who you've heard of would vouch for me if you haven't heard of me personally. And that pitch, in the pitching, whether it's an event or a media event or an interview, you want to kind of have someone who is, if you could be on the shoulders of a giant, let that giant kind of speak for you. And that's, again, it's just kind of establishing those relationships. I do think that stamina and sticking around and being nice and saying yes to any opportunity, every opportunity, like that, in the long run, that pays off, because you're just putting in the time, you're pounding the pavement, and you're making connections and then doing it for someone else who needs it.
Yeah, I'm trying to crack that code myself. I'm working on some fiction. I think I told you all that. So, I will be guinea pigging this. So when I figure it out, I will let everybody know, how to do it. What about you, Amelia? What about memoir? Because this is, very personal. It can be, very topical, but how have you found that to be, challenging or not to be able to pitch?
I think it's challenging because you have to try and make relevant your personal experience. My personal experience, I have to make that relevant for the masses, right? I mean, that's what a book is. But when you're pitching to media, you kind of want to make that relevant to them, that it is a story worth telling using their media. And I think like it helps, like what came to me as we were talking earlier, Julia was talking about it and Clay was talking about it. You kind of have to become the poster child for this topic that you are carrying. I think I tried to do that, and I think that has been helpful for me creating an author brand on my author platform. It's not that one speaking opportunity, but it's the 10 others that you said yes to, builds up and says that, gives you kind of credibility that you've done this before, and it gets easier with every time. And then when you sit and share blurbs and you share work that you've done, it kind of means something, that you've been doing this, you are an authority on this topic that you're talking about. Therefore, it becomes easier to get your foot in the door. I think that's how I've been talking on as many podcasts as I can, like Clay was talking about, like just saying yes to everything that comes up and presenting yourself on and making sure that you talk to your points, talk to your topics, and be the poster child.
Yeah.
And then when I pitch to media, I'm like, I've spoken on all these podcasts, I've written on all these, I've written all these essays and given all these op-eds and interviews and stuff, and that really helps me get into more podcasts and more media arrangements.
Don't be a snob when it comes to media. Just do it. It doesn't matter how small it is. Doesn't matter. Just do it, because media begets media. You never know who watches that. You never know where that producer goes. You never know where that writer is. Just do it. It'll lead to something good, I promise. So to your point, definitely. Julia, I want to slide over to you to talk a little bit about, you have a free ebook, which I would love to give a shout out for, From Author to Entrepreneur. And you can get that at beabookbusinessboss.com. And part of this discussion is about being an author means having your own business. And part of that is really putting your best face forward. How do you feel about press kits, for authors, or what things should people have when they are booking for conferences and book events and media and all of that? What should you have in your arsenal, your toolkit?
Okay, so as far as I have a full press kit, I have one sheets, I have a multiplicity. It just all depends on what audience I'm talking to at a particular time. But at the bare minimum, you need a good one sheet. And what's in a one sheet is you should have a very professional photo, all of your contact information, including social media. You should have any, as Clay said, about any comments, any reviews or any of that nature. You should also include not only an email, but a phone number. So even if it's a Google Voice, or if you have a PR person, because some people still want to call, some people want to email. There are also the picture of your book. If you have one book, fine. If you have multiple books, make sure that there's a link to your online store so they can see the additional multiple books that are out there. So that's the bare minimum. If you're taking your press kit to the next level, you need to include 10 questions. Just like Paula said, you need to include 10 questions that you really want asked. Now, we're going to talk later, probably later, about what if they don't ask on
They
that
might not
10
even
list.
ask those questions.
All right,
Right.
they might not even ask them, but at least you can provide them up front.
Yeah.
Also, a couple things. Have links to, if you've spoken before, some previous flyers where you have been before, or if you are a speaker and they videotaped you, I always tell people, just turn my phone around and hit it and just give me 10 seconds or 1 minute of what I'm talking. Just as the young people say today, I need receipts. I need proof that I was out there and actually available doing what you do. And then any upcoming events, anything that you're doing, because, you know, people like to feel like, are you the first place I've been are we the first organization? Are we the first?
Yeah.
I don't know whether I want to be the first. You know, is there an opportunity where somebody else has heard you speak or someone else has approved? Then they're more likely to bring you on board. And then, of course, what's coming up next, not only the next event, but possibly the next book and the subject matter. And then maybe some other topics that you've talked about, include that as well. I have a letter in the beginning that's a little old school, but I still have a letter introducing myself, my referral list, potential referrals, so people can reach out and contact. I like it in electronic version, so making sure that you have an electronic version, and if you are an in-person event, because we all seem to love in-person events, have something in print, because some people still, just like they want the paperback book, they still want to have a piece of paper in their hands so that they can contact you. So those are a few things that I would definitely include. Some people like the QR codes and all of that. That's really good, but I would have both, because the younger audiences love the QR codes and some of the phones don't work with them. So making sure that you have, making sure that you don't just have one way that people can contact you, that you have multiple access points so that you can get that call, you can get that email, you can get that following so that people can book you for that next event.
And get it in their inbox. I have to say, I mean, as a TV producer for many years, I might not have booked you right away. You know, might have been like, we already have something going on, or I just did something like that. But you better believe later on that month or 2 months later, I'm like, wait, wasn't there somebody who was an expert in cardiology? Let me go find who that is. And I would just use my email like Google and see who had pitched me. And so, you know, you might hear from them many, many months later, and you feel like, hey, where were you? But, you know, don't be a snob. It's something that you want to make sure to get your stuff out there. And, you know, you will be found at some point. Media does beget media, and you just want to be ready. That's why it's very important, you know, to have your questions ready and your press kit and all of that. And Johnny has put all of the links there. I know many of you were asking about our links, so they're all there for you. But I want to jump into now the actual performance of the event that we're doing, right? So we've booked whatever event it is. Preparation. Clay, how do you prepare to make sure that it goes as seamless as possible and you sell many books and it's quite fabulous?
Well, it's never seamless. But I would argue that's the fun of it. And you never, I mean, my metric is, as long as there's more of them than there is of me, it's a successful event. If two people come out, if one person comes out, it's a tie. Like that's, you know, like I think anything beyond the booksellers is just, that's all you need. And I honestly believe that, you know, in terms of preparation, you know, if you have a book tour, whether that's 1 event, 2 events, 10 events, I always pick a chapter. I always pick a section, and I start reading it out loud to myself before I go out there into the world. I just sit right here. I start kind of getting it into my system. And then, so by the time that I'm doing an event, the words themselves aren't as cold. They're familiar. They've been in my voice. And, you know, reading them to other people it's a very different beast, and it's a very different, you know, experience than, you know, reading to oneself or audiobooks. There's a bit of a level of performance, and it doesn't hurt if you're a bit of a ham. And I think that ways to prepare for that is, if you have someone in your life who you could read to, sitting at the dinner table and just kind of doing it, and then maybe bringing in 2 people, 3 people, just getting your sea legs by way of kind of reading to people who you're familiar with, kind of eases the kind of the sharpness of reading in front of people that you don't know. But also to be aware of the fact that they're there because they want to be there. And like that, at the end of the day, like anybody who comes to a reading event, whether it's virtual or in person, they're not there for extra credit. They're not there because somebody made them come. Like, they want to hear you read. And there's something kind of like, I don't know, like just that kind of thought takes a little bit of the edge off for me as well. Like, we're all in this together.
They want you to do well. They're excited for you, right? You have to put that mindset, put that hat on. Same thing with journalists too. If you're doing an interview, for the most part, it's not going to be, a gotcha journalism kind of thing, depending on what your topic is, of course. But for the most part, they want you to look good, because then they'll look good. They'll be able to say, hey, that was a successful segment. That worked out perfectly. Great. So I agree, speaking out loud, so for fiction, obviously you want to read out loud. What about for nonfiction, Amelia or Julia? For me, I know that if I'm going to do TV or I'm going to do an event like this or whatever it is, I also do it out loud. I practice my questions. I say it out loud. I look directly into the camera the way that I'm going to do it. I hear myself say it. Sometimes I'll record myself on audio or video and watch it or listen to myself so that I sort of remember how I want it to sound. What works for the two of you?
I think, like you said, like I was going to say that record yourself. Like, sometimes you don't have someone to like give you feedback, but like watching yourself, you can kind of hear your intonation, kind of feel the words that are coming, and kind of watch your body language that you're doing, because you want to appear comfortable, you want to appear confident, and you don't actually see that if you're just reading to yourself, right? So it's reading to people, I think that comes out, and reading on camera that comes out. I think also like preparing for the engagement parts. I think that's
like the questions that'll be asked of you.
Yeah. Or introducing yourself. Like, how do you introduce yourself? What's your elevator pitch? Like, if you have 30 seconds before you start reading, you want to be able to tell people what your book is about, and you want to kind of polish that to a piece that comes out eloquently and fluently, and that sounds good. And then I think like I usually do outlines. I have good notes with me of things.
Do you use note cards, or how do you do it?
I do use note cards. Yeah. Or sometimes it's on my phone. I think that helps to like guide the conversation, because when you're there at an event, you're not just sitting there and reading, but you're kind of guiding people through the book or excerpts that you're going to read. You want to have that played out too. Like, what am I going to say before I read this? I'm not just going to open my book and go, once upon a time, right?
Yeah.
And I want to be able to engage the audience with a story of like a lead in to what I'm going to be talking about. So you want to have an outline about how that's going to flow, and how you're going to bring the audience through your book. Because what I do is I don't read a chapter, I read excerpts from my book. So like they're like five standard excerpts that I read at every reading, almost. And so I have my lead-ins for all of those, and I have like a little in between explaining what the topic is about, what I'm going to be talking about, prepare people. And I think like preparing yourself also for things like silence or answers that you don't have. I think we're going to talk about that later.
I mean, we can talk about it now, because I just feel like there's going to be an opportunity. I mean, if you have a horror story, please tell it, because it happens. Clay mentioned earlier that you have to be a little bit of a ham, but also improv helps, because you never know what might happen. People might not show up, right? You might be there on your own and be like, I'm going to tap dance for these 3 people because they showed up in the snow, and it's going to happen because they're here. Why not? Right? Something might go wrong. The interviewer might not ask the question you were prepared to answer. I mean, this is what I do all day, every day with authors that I work with. It's not that they asked bad questions, it's that you didn't have the right answer. So you really need to be able to practice that and have that down. So any stories of horror that you'd like to share, anyone? and how you turned it around, because we want it to be a good story.
Well, I don't really,
sorry.
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Amelia.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say I don't really have a lot of horror stories because you know, I would have liked for the outcome to have been much, much better. But what I end up doing is turn it into, it's supposed to be an in-person event. So I end up making it live.
With your phone, you
with
just
that
say,
phone, I hit the phone and I either go live, I record it, I use it later. I'm a champion for repurposing content.
I love that. Great backup.
Right. Oh, always. And then of course you always back to when you were talking about there's only 3 people who showed up. Those
Yeah.
3 people, we're going to talk to them and engage them like it's 3,000 people. You know, they did get in their car, they did come through the snow and ice to you, so you definitely should do that. With Clay talking about fiction, because I write fiction and nonfiction and children's, but if you're talking about fiction, you should ham it up as much as possible. With nonfiction, you need some prep questions ahead of time. I'm not a really good lecturer. I love the two-way conversation. I taught that way in my classes. I didn't like the silence, so I'm gonna make you talk one way or the other, even if you have to close your eyes and I ask the question and you're answering it anonymously. So I've had that where I had my own book signing and nobody was there but family and friends. Okay, a few family, a few friends came. It was a big, huge basketball game, and everybody was either at the game or home or out tailgating. And I was like, this was the wrong day. I picked the wrong time.
Live
But
and learn, right?
You live and learn. But what ended up happening, I just turned it into a family. We was eating, we ordered hors d'oeuvres, we had a good time. We turned on the TV, watched TV. I talked about my book briefly, made it into a major photo shoot, turned it into a video op, and went from there. So you can turn any event to be reused multiplicity of times on your YouTube channel, on your social media. Ignore how many people come. Yep, we're disappointed. Yes, we would have liked more to have come. But remember, books are evergreen. You just need a new audience to expose your book there, the message, your passion for it. And we just keep moving. We just keep moving along. And so therefore, repurposing that content, repurposing that opportunity, make it as a beautiful photo shoot as possible and move right along to the next event and to the next audience.
Yeah, it's a long game. You know, I think that's one of the misconceptions. You know, authors think, oh, the book will come out and then that's that. No, you will still talk about that book for a very, very long time, hopefully, right? And continue to do media about it. We're going to take questions from the audience in just a few minutes, but so if you have questions, stick them in there. I know a bunch of you have already. But Clay, I wanted to get any horror stories from you, and then I wanted to, after that, I just want to ping each one of you for how to keep the conversation going after the events are over and all of that. And then we'll get to the question. So horror for us, anything to share, Clay, please.
I mean, too many. I mean, I clocked myself on a bookshelf once and bled through a reading. So, but that's not, there's no coming back from that. That's not there's no redemption from that. But, you know, to kind of piggyback off of what Julie was saying, it's inevitable that you're going to do an event for 0 people. Like, it's just, I feel like it's par for the course for everybody, regardless of where you are in your career. So, to kind of take a page off of what Julia's saying, like repurposing that content. If you have a camera and you have an Instagram account, you take a picture from this angle and it's like, hey, I'm about to do this amazing reading here. And you just don't have to show the empty seats. Like, you don't have to, nobody needs to know what's on the other side of that camera. And, for better or for worse, like, we're all doing that. And I think that what does the spin, the thing that kind of makes it, that pushes it beyond the one event, the one bad event, is that no one needs to know. And the imprint in of itself has more kind of lasting power. It ripples out more than the actual night, the actual event. And I think because if you can post something on social media. If the bookstore or whoever the hosting body is, if they post a picture, like all of a sudden, it's not just you kind of being like, hey, everybody, look at me. This is what I'm doing tonight. It's that ripple effect. And in terms of the kind of ping, how do you keep the conversation going? The thing that I've realized is that, we're all kind of on our author islands. We're all kind of like shouting into the ether, like, buy my book, pay attention to me. And you don't know how it's affecting sales or if it's making a difference. But there is a moment where you feel like, oh, someone else is talking about me, or someone else is talking about my book, and I have no idea who that person is. And that ripple effect, that first ripple is, I believe social media has this kind of power to really kind of push the conversation beyond you, because you want to get beyond your own kind of personal followers and go to that, whatever that second or third ring on Saturn is, because that's where it starts to really kind of take root or take effect. And I find Instagram is pretty amazing, because Bookstagram is a phenomenal thing where somebody will take a picture of themselves posing with your book. And that's not something that you can ask for, demand of people to do. But if they do it, it's because they responded to the book and they want to keep the conversation going with, like, I read this book and this is an amazing book and I really want it. And I think you should read it. And then you have to just kind of find the way to kind of nurture that, fan those flames.
Yeah, I love it. I always get a kick out of it when it's in another language, when the book has been translated and you see the pictures come up of the, it's so delightful. I always get a kick out of it. It's lovely. Amelia, what about you? How do you keep the conversation going after the book event or the media interview is done?
I think you keep going and keep trying to stay relevant. Like, I keep up with my social media. I'm planning on, my book is not very old yet. So this is conjecturing what will be. So I think like I'll continue with like op-eds, continue with interviews, podcasts, and like as long as I can take it, I can handle it. I think there will come a point where I'll hit capacity and say like I need to take a break or move on to the next thing. But I think for as long as I can, I'll continue this media tour and book tour as far as I can do it. Because I think you can stay relevant and keep talking about, you'll always be the author of such and such.
100%. Totally.
Right?
My first book came out, I don't know, 9 years ago, 8 years ago or something. I still talk about it. It's still, it's still relevant. So, and Julie, I know you've written tons of books in all the genres. And so what about you? What is that one piece of advice you have to keep that conversation going?
Follow up. If people reach out to you, make sure that you're doing follow up. I mean, it's multiplicity of ways, because I do publish. So there are people who schedule time with me, and then there are other people who just follow me on social media. There'll be people who will download my free ebook, and then I'll keep in connection with you're not automatically put on my email list, but I will have another way to communicate with you. If you're interested, then we move forward. I give you the opportunity, I give you the option for a newsletter and social media and to let's have a conversation if you want to know more. So making sure that there's follow-up and there's two-way communication. And if people want to be on your list, have an opportunity for them to opt in for your list. So they get your monthly newsletters, they get access to your magazine, they get access to you and whatever you have to offer. Because some, especially nonfiction books, they lend themselves to coaching, mentoring, the conference, the event, the workshop. So it all depends on what type of book, what topic, and what it lends itself to. And I always caution people, especially nonfiction books, that people may want more from you. So you have to determine what you're going to offer and what is going to be available. But the very first thing is making sure that you have follow-up, because people will respond. Do you offer coaching? Do you offer mentorship? Is there possible for us to have a conversation? And then it will lend itself naturally to whatever the next is supposed to do. But number one, follow up.
Yeah, one of the best pieces of advice I was ever given before I had a book was to start an email list. And I thought, what would I do with an email list? You know, what is that for? I don't understand.
That was gold during pandemic, baby. That was gold.
It was gold. It was the best advice I was ever given. Of course, it was by a book publicist. And so, you know, I have built this list over years and years and years. So people who bought my first book, who followed me from before I even had a book, I'm still in contact with them.
Yes.
And what I would do is I would literally take a pen and paper to my book signing events and say, if you want to sign up for my email list, just put your name and your phone and your email address right here. And I'll send you a free whatever it was at the time that I had. And that really helped to build it. And putting those links also in the book, I found to be very helpful. I did that with both of my books, where I had guides that went along with the book so that we can continue the conversation from there. So it's not just like you bought the book, you liked it, period, the end. Getting people to follow you, getting people to follow you after the fact is really helpful. And even for my second book, I was able to go to the people who were on my list to say, hey, what do you want me to write in the second book? Because I have some ideas, but I want to see what you think.
Exactly.
And that's a lovely conversation to be able to have. So Johnny, I want to, if you're over there, I want to ping you real quick, because I know there's some questions that have been coming in. I want to make sure we leave time for some of those, because I see there's been some good ones.
Yeah, thanks. So let's talk about bookstore events first. Any tips for choosing the expert? A lot of people wanted to know that. And one person asked, is it worth choosing multiple excerpts in case people see you multiple times or hear you on a podcast and you don't want to be saying the same thing over and over again?
It's a good question. I feel like, you know, to kind of piggyback off of it, you know, I find the in conversation aspect of live events really helpful as well, where it's not just you kind of doing a reading or a kind of talk back, but you're in conversation with another author. And usually it's kind of better if that author may be a little bit more well-known than you, so that you can kind of, whatever kind of audience base they have would be, they would feel compelled to come out as well. And you're in conversation with that person. I tend to pick the same excerpt. I find that it's just, you know, it's like listening to a music album. Like there's your radio hit, like you play it, and it, you know, it's the thing that gets people, you know, ready to buy the rest of the album. I sometimes have a plan B, but that's only if I feel like I'm personally getting fatigued off of reading the same excerpt over and over again.
I agree that you should have not only one, you should always have two, just in case there is that. So I always have a second space already marked, and just in case. And sometimes I don't even get to the first excerpt, and sometimes I only get bits and pieces of it, and then a second is not necessary. But I'll always advise people to always have a backup plan. That comes from my teaching days. When the lesson doesn't go well, you always have to have a backup plan. So I always do, either from another book or from another section of the book itself.
I like to do more than 2 excerpts. I actually read like about 5. They're short excerpts, but they kind of give you the idea of the book. So I think that that's been my experience. And I change it up sometimes depending on the crowd that I'm with. Like if it's a triggering topic in like a bookstore, maybe I wouldn't do something so triggering or difficult to digest. I kind of pick according to the crowd. But I have like the set, however many.
Mm-hmm. Do any of you have any tips for punching up a book signing if people are not having much success at those? One person said he does well with workshops and panel discussions, but when it's a straight up book signing, it doesn't seem to go as well. I guess hamming it up was the advice for today.
Hamming it up, but also making sure that there is opportunity for a Q&A, making sure that there is an opportunity. It all depends on the book. Sometimes I'm subject to do a handout, or not just for them to ask me a question, but there could be an activity, an icebreaker that you can have along with it. Ask them what a part of the book, if they've already read it, they haven't read it, what would be something associated with the actual topic itself. Yes, the number one goal, of course, at book signings is for people to actually purchase your book. But along with that, sometimes you want to make it an experience because you want them to have a connection, not only with this book, but with you, the author, the person who's in the book business, who plans on not only having this book, but multiple books to come. So if you create an experience, then therefore they're more likely to repeat, to come back, and to follow you and purchase whatever you're writing the next time.
I always do wine, snacks, and I do giveaways. So for my first two books, because, it was list making, I would have, fancy list making paper that I got, donated from whatever company, fancy pens, fancy this. And I would do a little bit of an activity, something fun, a little icebreaker to get people interested. A little bribery goes a long way, I'd say.
I think also the connection that you make with people afterwards, like it's not just when you're signing the books or when you're reading the books, when you have that time afterwards to actually mingle, I think that's a very important thing to do, to actually connect with people and create those connections.
Yeah, making it personable. Like, the people who come, I feel like the actual, if we're talking about book signings, there's this kind of mentality of just like get through the signatures, like sign, whether it's 5 people, 10 people, 300 people, but like having the ability to kind of have a conversation with the person who's there, however brief it may be, personalizing the actual signature, whatever it is that you're signing, like, people kind of, they take away that book, and they'll always remember that event, and they'll remember the time that you spent with them. And I think anything that you can do to kind of tailor the experience to the individual, as daunting as that may sound, like that's the thing that they're taking away, and they're going to hold on to it for however long.
Clay, do you have any particular tips for children's book events? Several people asked. Karen in the audience says she likes to bring a puppet with her, and kids love that.
I've been fortunate enough to write for middle grade readers, so like ages 8 to 13, which kind of falls specifically in the like 5 through, I guess, grade 8. Doing school events is phenomenal, because you're plopped in an auditorium with 200 screaming students, and maybe 190 of them aren't interested in you, but the 10 that are fans for life, and they will continue to read you as you grow. So I don't know if it's advice, the right kind of advice, but booking school events, meeting teachers, connecting with admin is phenomenal, because in addition to for being crass and talking about book sales, there's also a budget for maybe you will be a part of their kind of season of bringing in guest lectures or guest events, and that's super helpful. Helps with gas money for sure.
I like the puppet idea if you have a mascot. I also like the idea if you have bookmarks to give those away to, if you have those kinds of things available. It's always good that if you're signing, of course, after the talk, that there's music available. If it's a smaller class, snacks are fantastic. And they don't have to be that involved. Cupcakes are a little over the top, but if you can do some kind of kid-friendly snack, they will love you for life, and the teachers will too. As a retired elementary and high school librarian, we love authors coming in to talk with children's books. You just need to reach out, send a one sheet. If you want to give one copy of your book away, fine, but otherwise, children's books are really moving. If your book has a diverse character in it, that's moving even faster right now, that we're the season that we're in right now. So they're looking for as many authors who are willing to do that. They have funds for that. And children's books are really definitely moving in my world.
kids and adults alike love swag. Like they love bookmarks, they love stickers, they love buttons, and that's, maybe your publisher has a budget for that, but like I would happily kind of put together, something that the reader can take home and
Yes.
has the link to the website, or it has
Of course it does. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Our code.
Um, so we talked about how to pitch to media, but for those just getting started, who should they pitch to? Like what job titles should someone be looking for if they're looking at the staff directory at a media outlet?
Sure. Well, you want to definitely look for TV, the producer, assignment editors. I would start local, right? So you're going to start with your local community, where you are, your local TV station, radio station. Start there. You could even call and ask who's the person to pitch for such and such, show. They used to be cranky about it. Now it's much easier to get somebody's email address, right? And if the person on the phone doesn't give it to you, hang up and call 2 hours later. Somebody different will be on the phone and you will definitely get it. You can connect through LinkedIn for sure. But also for written, right? You have to watch and see who's the byline, right? And follow that person, see what they're talking about. Those are things, I was doing media for myself before I even had a book. While I had a blog, I was offering tips and tricks and things that I could do because I knew that legitimizes you, as an expert, is to say that you've been in the media. So get out there before you think that you're ready, way before the book comes out.
If you're early in this process and you're brand new, like this is your very first book, be sure and get your feet wet with podcasts and going live on other people's platforms on social media. That gets you in the habit of answering questions, that gets you in the habit of being in front of media. Now, as much as we love radio, we love television, but there is a part about social media that we need to access to as well, especially if we're just getting started and just getting our feet wet. So do not sleep on going live on someone's Facebook page, YouTube, Instagram, what LinkedIn. Do not sleep on those opportunities, because you remember, people who tune in to that platform are also sharing you to other arenas, to other avenues. Being able to share and have people tagged in your comments really quickly can easily lead you directly to that television, to that radio outlet that you might not have gotten after sending so many emails, but you missed it because they had an opportunity on social media to actually not only see you, not just get your one sheet, but they actually got to hear you too at the same time.
Now, authors get a lot of marketing opportunities. They're solicited by a lot of marketing opportunities. Book clubs, online book promotions, Instagram book tours. Is there anything in that realm that y'all have participated in and enjoyed?
I've done I have several book clubs. They now have not only turned it into the book clubs for my fiction books, but they've turned into beta readers. So even when it's in the rough draft format, I'm subject to send it to a book club. If you're in fiction, book clubs are really, really key, have been key, definitely key for me. Places that I use a lot. The book tours, I have invested in only for exposure purposes. I have not seen direct access for sales, but especially if you're new and it is a low end budget, now hundreds and thousands of dollars, I don't know whether I recommend doing that. But if it's a very low budget item, I would try it so that you would get your book in front of new eyes and new places. I have done that. And what has happened from there, it has led me to media and to additional interviews and additional podcasts. I mean, I only paid for like 5 stops, and it was nearly 20 stops by the time I ended, because other people saw me and asked me, and so on and so forth. So I have participated in both of those. They have been extremely rewarding for me to lead me. Long game, as Paula has said repeatedly, the long game has turned into book sales and more book event opportunities.
Many authors are wondering about hiring a publicist. whether they're self-published or traditionally published, and hiring an outside publicist. Is that legitimizing and beneficial to have someone other than yourself doing these contacts when reaching out to people? Do we think there's a benefit?
I think so. I think like I'm a debut author. And so, but also we have to keep in mind that a publicist is only good as good as their connections. And like if you get a good publicist who is well connected and can get you places where you want to be, I think that's worth it. Or you could be stuck with one that does busy work that doesn't really get you anywhere. So you want to really research your publicist and get one that actually works for you. But I think it did, like for me, it did get me into some national media, get me into the door for those kind of things that I wouldn't have thought I would have been able to access myself. So that's been helpful. But also it's a budget. So how much you can pay them will dictate how much they can do for you. So there's that to keep in mind too.
And there's no guarantees, right? You know, it's so difficult. There's great publicists and there's not so great publicists, and it doesn't matter who they are. If the queen dies, your segment is dead. You're not going to go on the air that day. No one cares about your book. They only care about what just happened in the news. So, you know, the best laid plans, of course, which is unfortunate, but I do agree, especially if you're new to this, it would be helpful to have someone who has those contacts, who can pitch you in a way that really makes sense, and that they know the right types of people, right? Who covers books, who covers this, who covers that. This is all they do all day, every day. And as a TV producer, you know, I would have my favorite publicists, my favorite people that would come to me and say, hey, I've got this great author. And so you trust that person to know that it's going to be somebody who's going to give a good segment, who's going to give a good interview, who will be interesting. But as the author, you want to make sure that you also then cultivate that relationship with whoever it is that you did the interview with. Because once you stop paying the publicist, they leave with all of their contacts. And you're like, oh, well, I was on the Today Show once. Great. That's it, right? So you want to make sure to keep those conversations going.
To at least one more question about festivals and conferences. Maybe Julia, you know, the guidelines for proposals to do a panel sometimes say they don't want you to be selling anything. So do you have tips for crafting a pitch or a proposal that doesn't come across as too salesy?
Make sure that whatever the theme of the conference is aligns with, as we've stated earlier, aligns with what your book message could be associated with or affiliated with. Make sure that you are comfortable with the topic or whatever the information they're wanting to offer their audience, that you're meeting that need and not striving to just sell your book. You want to be deemed as not only just the author, but as someone who has a passion, information, and expertise in regards to that topic. Believe you me, if you have something to offer, if you have information and expertise, knowledge related to that topic, they'll find your book. They'll buy your book. They'll connect with you. They'll follow you. And for the long game, it may not immediately be books at that particular event, but it could be for the long game. If you have the opportunity to have a table at that conference or to have a table at that event, your books will more likely sell as well. Sometimes the event does exactly have the stipulation that you're not supposed to be salesy. Then some conferences and events, you have a table immediately after you speak and you're available, and your books are available for sale. Your promotional materials are available for pickup immediately after you speak. You have to make sure that whatever the stipulations, that you stay in those guidelines, so that, because, you know, news travels fast. As much as you would like to say, well, they don't know me, so I can just do whatever I want. No, baby, it'll happen. Somebody will find out, and you won't, you'll ruin your eliminate or limits, not necessarily ruin, but eliminate your chances of being heard again. You need to stick with the topic and stick with the guidelines and the stipulations that they have for that organization and that conference.
That's great. That's great. Well, finally, this is all very exhausting for some authors who would prefer to just, be sitting there and writing. You have to write, you have to eat, and you have to do this stuff. So do you have any tips for managing your time and keeping your energy and motivation up for this stuff? Do you do a little a day? Do you do this stuff on Mondays? That kind of.
I'll go ahead. I always return to my why. My why gets me up out of bed every day. My why gets me up early in the morning. I go to bed at 8 and I'm usually up between 4 and 6 a.m. So I'm an early riser. I'm an early to bed. I know my why, not only business wise, but personally. What are my goals? What are my dreams? What are my visions? When I retired 4.5 years ago, I said I was going to bet on me. And I meant that. And so I'm really personally and individually a self-starter. If your why does not get you out of bed, if your passion for the thing that you're writing does not motivate you to move, I suggest, this is just me, I suggest that you change what you're writing about and rethink as a writer, as an author. Yes, life happens. My father has passed away. My mother has been ill. My husband has been too. But in the midst of all of that, I always return to my why. I find time to write. I'm addicted to it. I love it. When the bug bit me, it bit me hard. So therefore, I ask you, why are you doing it? And then 2, think about who you're writing for and writing to. Once you determine those 2 things, and if you love it more than anything, you will find the time, you will carve the time, and you will be about the time and the business that it takes to move your book to the next level.
Thank you. All right. Well, with that, thank you all so much. It's a wealth of knowledge you've imparted. Clay, Amelia, Julia, and Paula, thank you, and thanks to the audience for being here.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
We'll send out links to each of our lovely panelists, so you can find them online, and you can email me at support@authorsguild.org with any questions. Thank you, and have a good day.
Bye, everybody.